AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, now it's time for Straight Talk with Dr. Doug Lisle, where he answers your questions. Here's the thing. He gets more questions than any other guest on Chef AJ Live. And just in the last 3 months, we probably have over 50 that we're trying to get to. And that doesn't count the ones from the last 4 years we haven't gotten to. We have a policy on Chef AJ Live. We always answer the questions first that have been submitted to people that are subscribers. We give you priority. That's why we rarely can take questions from the chat. But in this case, we have such a big backlog that we are getting ready to do our Dougathon 2, Sunday, April 21st from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time, where you can not only get your question answered live by Dr. Doug Lisle, but even be on Zoom and see him. Last one was super fun. You can buy the recording to that one if you're interested. And for less than the price of a dinner out, 2 sushi rolls, you can get all your questions answered. And we've got some great ones today. Please welcome Dr. Doug Lisle. Why do you think you're so popular?
Who knows? No clue.
Okay.
We just like it. That's all good.
Maybe because it's everybody has psychology. Because the second most popular doctor is the skin doctor, because everybody has skin.
Ah, right.
That's the only thing I can think of, so that maybe people just resonate. Okay, so I think you're going to like this first question. I listen religiously to your Dean's podcast. I've heard every episode at least once. I don't recall you answering this. If you did, I apologize, but I find it's a very interesting question because it's on 2 of your favorite things, personality and genetics. And this question is from Cora Lee, and she says, Dr. Lisle, I know many people that have had their pets cloned, and they all say that the clone does not share the personality of the deceased pet. If personality is only genetic, how can you explain this?
There's I would say that the following is true. What they're observing is they're observing a couple of things. And that is that cloned animals are that is sort of not very good genetic goods, okay? Because there's been damage to that DNA in the process of living. So that was the sort of sad, tragic thing that they found out when they cloned Dolly the sheep, is that the offspring were basically aging very, very quickly because of the accumulated DNA damage from the time you took a stem cell out of that organism. So in other words, it's not, you're not getting a carbon copy that's starting from scratch. You're getting something with accumulated damage. Second of all, it's also true that identical twins themselves are not identical in personality at all. They're substantially similar. They're more similar to each other than they are anybody else in the world. But so then, of course, the great question in psychology for the last 40 years, since it was evident that genetics dominated personality, which it was not, people did not know that. When I started grad school, nobody that I knew and no professor that I knew thought that was true. Okay, so that evidence came in the mid 1980s, and it was shocking evidence for the field. The field really has not very well absorbed that news ever since. It goes against so much intuition that people have. They feel like they become something and that certain events happen and that turns them in certain directions in terms of their personality. They believe that that's what their intuition is telling them, even though all the evidence says, no, that's not in fact the case. What the evidence shows is that when we look for everything under the sun, was your mother punitive? Was your dad permissive? Was it the opposite direction? Did you have a big brother? Were you the third child out of 5? Were you a little sister or a little brother? Was your older sibling dominant to you? Were you abused by them? All of these questions they have looked at, and they've looked for any evidence at all that any of those events had anything to do with outcomes that they would see in adulthood. And the answer was no, they have no influence at all over personality. So it's like, wow. So it doesn't matter how my parent raised me? No, it doesn't make any difference at all. Yeah, and you might say, it's very important. And Robert Plomin, when he writes about this in Blueprint, he tries to make it extremely clear the distinction between two questions. We're not saying parenting doesn't matter. It matters because a parent can make your life hell or they can make it really good. But they're not changing your personality. So when we meet you at age 30, how your parents raised you isn't going to be making any difference. What we see at 30, that's the DNA is showing its way. Okay. That is so counterintuitive that people will argue until my dying day when I leave this planet. The overwhelming majority of the planet, including the overwhelming majority of psychologists, will think that that is not true. Okay, that's just there's no cracking open human nature and having them not be able to see this clearly. Now, so the question is, however, for those of us that were paying attention and actually understand scientific analysis and data well enough to understand it, we looked at the issue and it said, looks like it's a funny way to put it. And my colleagues in the field of behavior genetics and statistics would cringe when I say this, because they're like, no, don't even say that. It doesn't even make sense scientifically. Don't even use those words. But I'm going to do it anyway, because I'm going to try to give people a feel for this. You're about 60% similar if you're a monozygotic twin. In other words, well, what on earth does that mean? Well, let me tell you what it means. If you are you have two random people from this, or like, for example, an adopted kid and a biological kid in a family. Okay, they're raised by the same parents. What is the similarity of their IQs? How close are they? Well, IQs differ. In the population, they might be at 70, which is a very low functioning person, to 130, which is a very high functioning person. So it's like 60 points of dispersion. So, 100 IQ is right in the middle of the graph. 115, that's pretty smart. That's a college graduate. That's a pretty smart person. 130, that's your doctor. Okay, that's really smart. 85, not too swift, but that person has a decent job. They've got a blue collar job and they're doing okay. 70, not so good. Okay, that person has a very difficult time reading even simple sentences. Okay, so that gives you the feel for what this is like. And it's in a bell curve. So most people are in the middle, reasonably functional. That's kind of an average human. Okay, so two random people that aren't genetically related to each other, if they're raised in the same household, they will average about the difference between them statistically. If we take 1,000 of those pairs of adopted kids and biological kids, etc., they're about 17 points apart. Like, okay, so one kid is 105 and the other one is whatever that is, 88. Okay, or one of them's 98 and the other one's 115. That would be typical. Now you might say, well, what if they weren't raised apart? What if they didn't even know each other? We just sat on that street corner and we grab that girl that's walking by and we say, okay, come here and take this test. And then another guy comes by a little bit later on, an hour later, we say at 9 o'clock, the next person that comes around the corner, that's the person we're taking. We take that guy and we measure him. If we keep doing that, we're going to find out, guess what? The average difference between those two people is 17 points. Like, voila. That tells us that when you raise people in the same household, you're not influencing their IQ at all. Now, what about a brother and sister? Oh, well, they share half of their DNA. So what happens then between their two IQs? If DNA is having any influence, these people share half of their DNA. They should be a lot more similar to each other than 17 points. 17 points, they're not related at all. They're just two random people out of a baseball stadium. That's what we would expect the difference to be. I'm not saying that would be the difference, but if we did it 10 times, that would be the average difference. There might be two people sitting next to each other at a baseball game and one of them's 126 and the other one's 127. Yeah, that's true. But then somewhere else, there's two people sitting next to each other and one of them's 115 and the other one's 85. So on average, if we do this over and over again, the average distance between two random members of the population is 17 points. It's like the two random difference between two people of the population, two women in the population, is about 3 inches in height. You might have two of them, they might be almost exactly the same. But on average, we're going to find out, take two random women that are watching this podcast right now, and we're going to find that the average distance between any two women is about 3 inches. That's called the standard deviation. Okay. So it's 17 points for IQ, but it's 13 points if they are fraternal twins, or which is nothing other than a regular sibling. There's nothing magical about fraternal twins that makes them more alike than a brother and a sister. That's all they are. They just happen to be born on the same day, but they share 50% of their DNA. And a pair of fraternal twins or any other brother and sister, they will have an average difference in their IQ of 13. It's like, wow, that's still pretty different. I would have thought that they would have been a lot more similar to each other, given the fact that they share half their DNA. It's like, no, that's not how DNA works. It's going to turn out that makes them closer together than two random people, but not that much. It's like, huh, that's kind of interesting. Okay. So that's the same thing that you're going to see in personality. So you're going to see people that aren't related to each other have no relationship with their personality at all. But a brother and sister, yeah, they've got some, but they're still very different from one another. Okay, so that's how the genes are working. Now we're going to go all the way to identical twins. So now we have two people that have exactly the same DNA. So now we're going to find out, well, did upbringing matter with their IQ? No, turns out that those two people correlate what's called about 85% with each other, which means that typically if one twin is 105 IQ, the other twin is going to be somewhere between 100 and 110. They're going to be pretty close, okay? And you'd say, well, what accounts for the difference? Well, nothing that we can identify in the environment. Not how they were treated by the parent, not whether one of them got tutoring, whether one of them happened to, find Big Little books as a kid and like to look at the cartoons and the other one didn't. In other words, there is nothing that happens in their upbringing or their environmental processes or any teachers or anything that makes any difference. We know this is true because if monozygotic twins, identical twins, are raised apart, they are still 85% correlated. So if they living in the same bedroom with the same clothes, with the same parents and the same school, those people are no more alike than two people that never met and spent the last 40 years never even know the other one's existence. Those people, if we measure them, they are just as similar. And in fact, they are very similar. Okay. They are vastly more similar to each other than a pair of fraternal twins that are both boys that were raised in the same house. It's not even close. So now we look at that and we say, okay, but what accounts for the difference that one of them has 112 IQ and the other one has 109? There's 3 points difference there, Doug. Where's that come from? Had to be the environment. Yeah, it was the environment. But it was the environment in utero. It happened before they were born. Okay. So in the development of the fetus, there's going to be random factors, not good or bad. They are random factors. And the random factors, which side of the womb you're on. When your mom's lying on her side, it's like, oh, now everybody's going to be worried about, well, if I lie on my side, I'm going to cost my kid 3 IQ points. No, these are random factors. We don't even know. It's if you breed clones. So if you clone fruit flies in a bottle, they are genetically identical, but they are raised in slightly different places in that glass terrarium. And the sun is hitting the sunlight a little bit different as they're very early in the development. And you'll find out that they are not identical. There's quite a bit of diversity in there. So this is the reason for the diversity that you're going to see in clones, which is effectively what identical twins are. So the answer to the question about why it is that my cloned pet isn't the same personality, it's like, well, the truth is, if we had an expert measure the personality characteristics of that animal relative to other members of its species, you're going to find that the clone and the original have a lot in common. They're going to be highly correlated, but they're going to be substantially different, just like we're going to see in identical twins. Why? It's not because of their upbringing. It's because of subtle random factors in utero. So you and I know I've met a pair of identical twins. Who's your fancy
Dr.
girl?
Rosanna Alviera and Renata.
I sometimes I can't remember her name. I just think fancy, beautiful, a gal from Davis. Okay, so and her sister. So when I met them, they didn't look alike because the sister had been eating rich food in Brazil, and Rosanna had been eating super healthy food, so they didn't look the same.
Well,
And in
they look
fact,
alike now. Let me tell you, I've seen them twice. They've come for dinner, and it's really tough because they wear the hair the same, they dress the same, like jeans and a black shirt, and and from the back they look identical. Like you
that's
can't.
hilarious. What's
Yeah.
hilarious about that, AJ, and it's a great example of genes and environment interaction, and that is that in that case, you're looking at, well, now wait a second. Would their personalities diverge as much as their bodies? And the answer is, well, you're looking at something a little bizarre. You're looking at an unnatural input of a natural food. And so as a result, when you do that, you're going to get predictable and characteristic pathology. So that's what happens. So if somebody eats rich food, they're going to be 50 pounds overweight. As soon as you get rid of the rich food and get anything close to a normal input, guess what happens? They look identical. Okay, they look extremely similar, not quite identical. You can tell the difference between two MZ twins, but it's subtle. It's real subtle. Okay, and the same thing is going to be true of MZ twins and their intelligence. There's going to be little differences. So one of them is going to be a little quicker on the draw verbally. One of them is going to be a little bit better mathematically. One of them is going to be a little bit better artistically. One of them is going to be a little bit better mechanically. But one of them is going to be a little bit better socially. It's like you're going to see little differences in their functioning, but it's not going to be systematic in the fact that one of them is just better. It's like, no, there's going to be a random scramble of different capabilities. One of the most astonishing data sets that you will ever see on monozygotic twins is going to be in professional sports, because there's been several sets of monozygotic twins that have played in professional athletics over the last 50 years. We know who they are. You can see them. Okay, Harvey and Horace Grant, Dick and Tom Van Arsdale. And if you look at their career statistics, they are almost identical. They are so close. It's incredible. So these are two people that for 15 years play professional athletics, and they retire at 35. And you're going to find that Harvey Grant had 15,000 points in the NBA, had a 46% shooting percentage, and 1,000 rebounds. And Horace had 15,500 points, and he had 1,100 rebounds, and he had a 45.5%. It's like they are so close to each other. It didn't matter which one you drafted, they're going to produce the same. It's extraordinary. And so this is where we see, there's no doubt that the genetics are overwhelmingly dominating the show. If you met, what's the fancy girl's name again?
Roseanne?
Roseanne. Like if you bump into her sister, in a coffee shop, you'd think that's Roseanne, isn't it? And she said, no, I'm not Roseanne. Like, you're lying to me. Who else could it be? Okay. So, i.e., the only other person it could be on Earth would be her monozygotic twin. That's the only person that would look that similar. So, yeah, so you're going to find out that the clone of an animal is not going to be the same animal. Roseanne is not the same as her sister. If you meet and talk to them, they are somewhat different. But so you're hoping to capture that exact person, and you can't because they're unique. They are a unique combination of those genes and a bunch of random factors, almost all of which of the invariants that happens takes place when? In utero. So when they're born, that's it. Okay. Now, so very little of what's going to happen to those two people in the next 30 years is going to be the reason for the differences you see on their 30th birthday. If on the 30th birthday, you have these two identical twins, and they were either raised apart or raised together, It doesn't make any difference when we measure them at 30 on any personality dimension, whether they were raised apart or raised together. If it's a pair that was raised together, they are extremely similar. If they were raised apart, they are just as similar as the first pair. That's incredible that that's true. That tells you that their entire 30-year odyssey, it wasn't making any difference. It makes a difference in their life experience, but not their personalities. When you meet them at 30, you're going to see differences between them, whether they were raised together or raised apart. What are the nature of those differences? Well, clearly those didn't happen. They didn't separate and become different because of their different life experiences. They separated and became different because they came out of a chute different. It was already in there. The DNA is only one half of the story in biology. DNA is the template, but environmental inputs influence the output. It turns out that you might say, oh, well, then why couldn't you change your personality with environmental inputs the rest of the way? Well, it just turns out that's not how it works. It turns out, no, it winds up being fixed and embedded into the nature of the architecture of the neural circuits by the time you are born. It's like, wow. So you are, in fact, your personality is an interaction of personality of genetics and environment, but it's the environment in utero that is dominating the show, which means there's not a damn thing anybody can do about it because it's just a bunch of random factors. Okay. So that is the story of that. And that's why any cloned cat or dog isn't going to be exactly the same. In fact, it's going to be personality-wise a chunk different. Okay. And so it's like, that wasn't exactly the same, but it's going to have a lot of characteristics that are similar, but that's as close as it's going to get. That in some ways, it's kind of interesting to even contemplate that. It's like we come out into this world unique, even if we have an identical twin. We are a unique combination. It's just that if we happen to be walking the world with somebody that has our identical DNA, they're going to be pretty similar to us. And that's what you will find over and over again when you study identical twins.
Is this what some people that aren't you might think of as the soul?
Maybe they do. I just look at it as, if I see two identical twins that are slightly different from each other, but very, very different than other people. So let's suppose we have two MC twins and they have two MC twin brothers, and then they have another brother. Okay. And it's like, well, we look at these two, we see the MZ twins are super similar to each other, but the other brother is similar to them, but they're clearly not, really quite a bit different. Well, what is that? Okay, you can call it a soul, but I call it their DNA.
Thank you, Dr. Lisle. This question, I'm not going to say the name just because it might be well, if the person's watching, they'll know it's them. But anyway, they said, Dr. Lisle, I had an experience at work where I accidentally walked into an open bathroom and witnessed a coworker friend who is a physician forcing herself to vomit. I knew immediately she was bulimic. I tried to talk with her about it as a friend, encourage her to get help. She was so angry and told me to never discuss it with her or anyone else again, and that she had no intention of ever having a soul know what she was doing. She said it would ruin her and she would die. If I valued our friendship and her life, I would forget what I saw. I recently read an article on Medscape about medical professionals being at higher risks for eating disorders because of their high-achieving perfectionistic personalities that many medical professionals have. I fear so many don't get help and that these topics are not discussed or they're brushed over by so many of the online personalities who are also medical professionals. Can you please discuss the treatment of eating disorders more thoroughly rather than referring to formal treatment? And what specifically could a person do on their own who is struggling with bulimia but will never seek treatment?
Okay. Really quite an interesting story and a great question. So let me give you a way to understand my answer. So the I once there's a brief period of time where I had a couple of good friends of mine, Larry and Cheryl, and I lived in Santa Rosa area. And Larry talked me into going with him and Cheryl to the gym. So they had a gym that they liked down in Petaluma. And they said, oh, it's got a pool and it's got this and that. So, and it's like, oh, they didn't have a basketball hoop, but that's okay. I went and played with that one at the other club. But this was like, became like a Saturday ritual where I would go with Larry and Cheryl and go to the gym. And Larry was telling me how great it feels to swim because he loves swimming. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like swimming. I like it, in the sunshine in Hawaii, but otherwise, I'm out. They're going in the pool. He goes, no, it's got this really great feel to it. So it's kind of like you're running in water, etc. Well, I'm really skinny and Larry is kind of chunky. So he doesn't have any problem in the pool, but I sink like a rock. So I'm struggling a little bit. And so he goes, okay, well, you need to put a weight belt on. That's what some skinny people do. You clap that around your waist. Well, I put that on my waist, and then my rear end goes up and my front end goes down in the water. And I'm like, no, I'm still not buoyant enough. Okay, so the next day, then he got like a little jacket that I would put on because I was get cold. And he goes, okay, well, you put this little jacket thing on, and now you've got kind of a vest. And now I'm in the water, and then that feels better. It's like, okay, now I actually feel pretty good. But the problem is, I don't like all that, I'm swimming and breathing. He goes, no, you got to have a snorkel. Like, oh, okay, so get a snorkel. Well, then the snorkel doesn't fit right, and it hurts, and I got to get that right. And then my eyes, and oh no, you got to get a mask. Well, I got a big nose, and then it pushes the mask out. He goes, no, you got to get a custom mask. And I was like, okay. He goes, oh, it's really a lot more fun if you swim with fins. Okay, so then you have this really relaxing thing. Okay, this was this hilarious odyssey. And then my ears hurt because my ears get cold. And so now my ears hurt. And he goes, no, you got to have to put earplugs. Okay, so finally what happens is one day I have fins, weight belt, jacket, appropriate goggles, and earplugs. Now I'm happy. Now it turns out I do just what he says, and it's like, man, that was really nice. I feel fantastic. I feel the endorphins afterwards. And so I did that for a while, and then I got injured on the lifting weights, and then I never went back. Okay, so that was fine. I didn't care. It was too much hassle. But at least I got the point. I actually finally got every single obstacle out of the way. And then finally it worked the way it was supposed to work. It's a lot like a mechanic with a car engine. It's like, man, I can't get that. Is it the distributor? Well, replace that. Well, then what about, this part? What about that part? It's like, man, what is wrong with this thing? And finally, believe me, you replace that thing and now it works. That's what it was. Now, that's like bulimia. It's anybody that's got some snappy answer, it's like 6, 7 things. It's a whole bunch of little pieces to this thing. And so it's complicated. And you're not going to counsel the bulimic to love herself more, and therefore don't do this or do that. No, she's going to have to, she fears excess weight. So she's a oscillating anorexic. That's what she is. Well, what's that? Well, you're going to have to understand Shan Geisinger's work to understand the evolutionary biology of what drives that. Okay. So then we're like, okay, well, now that we understand that, and we now understand also we've got somebody that fears weight gain. So what are they doing? Oh, they're hyper-conscientious. They're restricting like crazy. Okay. And then what happens then? Well, then they're going to binge on high calorie density foods because they're not going to have planned in advance. Oh, and then what's going to happen? Well, then they're going to feel guilty about it. Then they're going to throw up. Okay. So in other words, there's a whole bunch of pieces to this. And the only thing that changes anybody's behavior is going to be new information. So what will happen is if they get new information, you're just petting them in a therapy session or talking to them about their childhood trauma, that's not going to do anything. No, there's a whole bunch of misconceptions and misinformation that is very, very difficult for these people to get right because they are close to the truth. Is it true that if you throw up the food, you're likely to, on average, eat less calories? Yeah, particularly if you're throwing up a bunch of rich food that you just cram. So will you keep weight off through such a bizarre strategy? Yeah, you could. It's like, oh man. So then I'm going to try to talk that person out of that. It's like, no, wait a second. They're going to have to understand a lot about how weight works. Well, they're not going to believe anybody. They've got 17 different opinions all over the place and a bunch of diet gurus. Who knows the truth? Well, how about the people that have actually studied this, both in the context of human evolutionary biology and in terms of empirical work now? So we follow the data from both cultural anthropology, which shows what people are eating, and in sub-Saharan Africa, it's 700 calories a pound and nobody's fat, all the way to Penn State University and Barbara Rawls and volumetrics, where it looks like it's somewhere around 564 or whatever the magic number is, that meta-analysis. But whatever it is, it's not 1,000 calories a pound and it's not 300 calories a pound. So as a result, this person learning, for example, somebody that's smart, I would coach them about satiation mechanisms, about how they don't have to monitor their breathing, they don't have to monitor their sleep, they don't have to, if they do, and you start monkeying with the sleep artificially, we get problems. We get people short of sleep and addicted to caffeine, okay? But we sure as heck don't have to monitor our breathing, for goodness sakes. No animal does. And animals aren't monitoring their fluid intake, and neither do we, except when we follow idiots that say, oh, you should drink 8 glasses of water a day because it's good for you, without any evidence to support that at all, okay? So we realize, no, and animals we don't have to tell people that live in Pittsburgh, oh, when you, in the winter, when you're going out to the car, you would want it warmer in the car, but don't do it. Keep it colder because that's better for you. Like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got temperature satiation mechanisms that are designed to make it perfect for you, and you're very intelligent about when you're a little cold or a little warm, or you're a little short of sleep, or you've had enough, or you breathed enough in the last 2 seconds, or you haven't, or whether you're thirsty or you're not. So why on earth would we not believe in our hunger drive? And the answer is, you don't believe in your hunger drive because you see everybody else and everybody's fat. So you're like, well, I can't trust that. And not only that, when I eat to my satiation, I get fat. So therefore, I'm not going to do it. So the only solution is to be unbelievably conscientious and then throw up if I've eaten too much. Reasonable. Now, in other words, there's total logic that's sitting under here. And the only thing that's going to fix it is going to be brick by brick, systematic education to somebody intelligent to actually explain to them literally where they are making mistakes, and then tell them, listen, you don't have to trust me. All we have to do is run experiments. Okay? We're going to run little tiny experiments, and we're going to figure out how much data we need to prove what, start to indicate whether something's true or not true. That's how you'll do it. So there's techniques that I use that are involved in treating bulimia, but it's all in a huge matrix. It's like getting Doug able to swim in the water comfortably. It's like, man, if you miss a piece, then that's the problem. Then I'm still in a mess. You got to get it all. Now, and that includes a lot of the anxious, stuff that's going on inside the person's head, and secrecy and all this kind of stuff. So counseling is a good thing. I've got people that are good at this. Dr. Jen Howk is a fabulous general counselor. She's not a licensed psychologist, but don't let that fool you. And so she's somebody that knows a lot about this kind of a space. That'd be one person. Binge eating, less psychologically sophisticated, but very good at binge eating process is Justina Fries. She's also another person. So these people, you could find them on my website. Just Justina, and then Jen obviously is a sort of a partner of mine in various things. So, or me. But the bottom line is that this lady is obviously in deep trouble. She's probably been doing this for 30 years. And you talking to her about it, going and getting some help, is completely useless. That is just literally not even scratching the surface. So it's kind of none of your business. Stay out of it. You need to, where you need to be at is with anybody close to you, that's super important to you that has a problem like that, those are the people that you grab them by the hand and force them and punch the little thing on the thing to get an appointment with me. Okay. So you've got somebody that actually has a comprehensive understanding of this and has a plan that isn't the plan that is actually misguided, that is going to be typically used in eating disorder treatment. Okay. If you want almost a sad, sickening, exhilarating, and fascinating look at eating disorder theory versus reality, read articles online at Shen Geisinger's website. Shen Geisinger is a outstanding evolutionary clinical psychologist. She's one of few in the world, and a client directed me to her about 5 years ago. And when I read her stuff, I thought, oh my God, I can't believe that somebody else has been walking in my moccasins 3 miles parallel to me, and I never knew she was there. Okay. And because she's a woman and because she had different interests than I did clinically, our knowledge bases and our abilities in areas are somewhat different. So Shan is absolutely an expert in eating disorder psychological process. I learned a tremendous amount by reading her stuff. And I was flabbergasted to read a beautiful synthesis of all of the psychodynamic and behavioral and cognitive behavioral thinking on the etiology of eating disorders, and then to see what Jan says it is, and you look at it and you just laugh. Like, all of the evidence supports Jan's view. It's a magnificent synthesis of finally a great scientist having an insight into reality. So Shan Geisinger does this. She gets she deserves some spectacular international prize for this. Instead, the world doesn't even listen. So the world doesn't listen. Why? Because they've got their own thinking. They're thinking that people have eating disorders because they've been traumatized in childhood and they've got issues with their father and their mother and they were shamed over this and that. And that's what happened. And Shan's like, no. That isn't what happens. That isn't the cause. The cause of this is actually far deeper and more fascinating, deep into our biology. And so if you're interested and worried about any of this, that's the first place you go. And then the second place you go is maybe talk to me or Jen Hawk. All right. Good question.
You know how, like, sometimes when people get gastric bypass, they can learn to out eat it and still gain weight,
Yes.
I've known some people, and actually this is on the True North website, they have that series called True North Navigators, people that have gotten well, where people it stopped being effective for weight loss and they actually gained weight, even continuing the bulimic behavior for years.
Yes. Yeah. That is when you see what that trap is, it's really hard. It's its own thing. It's a variant of the pleasure trap. And so these things are unbelievably difficult. I have had a lot of success treating bulimia. But there's as you say, it's like, well, what's the trick? What do you mean, what's the trick? That's like me telling Larry, how am I going to be comfortable in the pool? Is it going to be this? Oh, that's going to be the answer. No, that isn't the answer. It was like 6 different things. It went on for like 2.5 months. I kept getting frustrated. Keep getting in the pool, finding out that I'd complain about something else. And every time we'd get out, he'd say, well, how was that? I'd say, yeah, it was fine, except for this. and that's how we treat an eating disorder, is we got to take all the pieces so that the person is willing to take a risk and doing something that feels very dangerous to them. They have to do that in a way, they have to be convinced by the logic and the evidence that it is reasonably safe to take a chance. It's basically like a skittish kitten that you're just getting to know that keeps running away from you. And finally, if you're calm enough, they finally take a chance. Like, maybe this guy's not going to grab me and eat me. Okay. And then eventually you can become friends. And that's what the process is to get out of those traps.
Right. So it's not really an effective weight loss strategy, not long-term anyway.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
So again, another anonymous question. What drives a person to buy alcohol when they really want to quit? I've never had any physical symptoms to want alcohol, just stinking thinking. Social and binge drinking was always a part of my life, but since retiring, I can have it 2 or 3 times weekly, 3 to 4 glasses at a time.
Right. This is what this is. This is the nature of addictive process. So this person, if they're drinking 12 glasses of wine a week, it's not destroying their existence. This isn't 40 glasses of wine a week. But we can tell that it's a mildly addictive process in the sense that I don't like necessarily terms calling somebody an alcoholic, because it's sort of outrageous that we make it like you're either an alcoholic or you're not, and that there's some line somewhere in a Reader's Digest checklist about whether you are or you aren't. That's silliness. In other words, if you smoke 1 cigarette a year, are you a cigarette addict on New Year's Eve? What is that? Okay, what about if you smoke a cigarette a day? How big a deal is that? Well, now what if you have a cigarette every half an hour? What is that? Okay, well, we finally have a compulsive problem that is actually pretty seriously deleterious. Okay, we got 12 glasses of wine a week. Not great. That's a lot of your calories are coming from. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, this person actually was wanting to lose weight too, and I mentioned that
Right.
that's not a weight loss program.
Right. In other words, that's really concentrated food. Alcohol is it's basically got a little bit of oil in it for all intents and purposes. In other words, alcohol is 7 calories a gram as opposed to 4 for carbohydrate or 9 for fat. In other words, alcohol is very, very similar to fat. There's not very much alcohol in a glass of wine, but there's a little bit. It's like somebody took an eyedropper and squeezed some oil into your grape juice. Okay, so it's making it extra rich. And if you're drinking 12 glasses a week, it's like, you're getting a lot of concentrated calories in there. That's probably keeping some fat on you at all probability. Now, but the question is, quote, if you don't want to do it, why do you do it? Well, it isn't the case of you not wanting to do it. What you're going to find inside of animal brains is what the motivational system is it's an adjudicator of conflict. So you have things that you want and you have other things that you want, and oftentimes one forecloses the other. So you'd like to sleep in the sun, but you also, if you fall asleep, you're going to be potentially subject to a predator. So maybe you don't sleep in the sun, and you run a cost-benefit analysis on that. You want to get the tires on your car fixed, but you also don't want to take the time and not have your car for the next week. So therefore, you don't do that, and you risk the fact that maybe you're going to blow a tire. Okay, these are conflicts, and so the brain is designed by nature. Life is full of nothing but conflicts. It's nothing other than, gee, I could do this or I could do that. What should I do? And the brain is grinding through the data, trying to figure out what the best solution is. I can't forget I've completely forgotten what the person's question was. Oh, alcohol. Okay.
Oh, what makes a person continue to buy it when they say they want to stop? And
same reason that people buy chocolate cake. Okay. Same reason why people don't get up and exercise. This is conflicts. You've got what a conflict is that there's values on diverse sides of a problem. So if you sleep in, then you're going to be late for work, but you're going to be better rested. Okay. So there's nothing but conflict. So you're like, yes, but I would like the outcome of being thin and wealthy and rested and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yes, but then you would have had to give up all the other things that were valuable along the way that were in conflict with those things. The joke is the rich guy that has the first dollar he ever earned. Well, that would be insane if you did that. It's like the purpose of earning the money was to consume things. What, you didn't consume anything in the last 47 years? You just saved it all? That's not financial freedom. You've imprisoned yourself, for God's sakes. So obviously what you're seeing is that there are trade-offs. And if somebody wants to drink alcohol or anything else, or chocolate cake or anything that's, you're thinking, gee, I don't want to do that. Well, of course you want to do it. That's why you're doing it. In fact, you want to do it more then you want to have other consequences for not doing it. So let's face the facts. This is just your mind and the mind of a mosquito or the mind of an aardvark or a camel or a chimp is all working exactly the same way. They are resource acquisition computers, and they are full of algorithms inside of them. They are decision-making systems to attempt to try to make the right decision. And you say, well, I know it's the wrong decision. No, you don't know that it's the wrong decision. In other words, every 2 weeks, I find myself at McDonald's eating a cheeseburger, even though I'm a vegan and I know I shouldn't do it. It's like, why am I doing things that I don't want to do? And the answer is, oh, no, you wanted to do that. Why did you want to do that? Because there's value in that cheeseburger. Well, how is there value in the cheeseburger? Colin Campbell says there's no value in the cheeseburger. No, he doesn't. There are calories in that cheeseburger. Those calories are conducive to human survival. And in fact, there's a highly concentrated calories, so it's highly valuable for human survival. Trust me, if you were, shipwrecked or your plane went down in the middle of the Amazon and there wasn't any other food on board other than McDonald's hamburgers, you'd be damn happy to have them. You'd be extremely happy to have them. You would cheerfully eat 30 of those things if they were in a cold locker every damn day. You'd be eating one of those things. Of course, they're valuable. And so you've got neural circuits in you that tell you they're valuable. And you've got other neural circuits telling you, yes, but it's not optimally valuable as far as I can tell for my survival, because I've been convinced that that's not such a good thing. Really? It's not that convincing. That's the truth. So if you were to think about, if you could be easily convinced by expert evidence to go against your instincts, that would be a flaw in the machine. So if I lived in some land where we had a shaman in the group, and I was a guy that found a big nut tree and I harvested a bunch of nuts, and I came and started mashing them with rocks, and people were coming by and trading me stuff to eat spoonfuls of this stuff. And I was eating a bunch of it because it was kind of like modern peanut butter. I'm like, hey, this is really great. And the shaman came to me and said, Doug, I've studied your totem, and I've checked, when you were born according to the stars, and you should not eat that stuff. You should give it to me. What would I say? Say, go pound sand, shaman. There's no way I'm believing you. Why would I believe that? My instincts go back 1 billion years. It has engineered sensitivity to that high calorie food. I should not be susceptible to somebody talking me out of it. That would be evolutionary suicide. And it would be that other people would be evolved to manipulate me into giving me things that were highly valuable and giving them away. I should not be susceptible to that. So it's not surprising that people aren't susceptible to this information. So the Mayo Clinic says that you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. It's like everybody shrugs their shoulders and couldn't care. Why? They are following the past masters of the survival arts, which is the genetic code. Genetic code has built inside of you instincts that tell you what the right thing is to do. In the 1960s, it became codified in popular culture. It's called, if it feels good, do it. That is the bumper sticker of every animal that ever lived. Okay, now, so when we look at this now, we realize, oh, it's damn near impossible if somebody tells me I shouldn't be drinking alcohol, but my Stone Age brain, it's hitting this dopamine circuits, it's telling me I should. So it's a minor miracle that anybody ever believes anybody about any of this stuff and goes against their instincts. The only people that do it are a little odd. I've lived my life around these people now. I've met these people. I've met Joel Furman. I've met Michael Greger. I've met Alan Goldhammer. These guys are oddballs, okay? So there's a little oddity to them. There's a hyper-conscientiousness. There's a fascination with human health. All those guys are doctors. It's like, hey, so be it. And you can actually, if people are smart enough and they're conscientious enough, and there's actually now enough evidence in the world, and we can also use our social instincts to analyze the character of people who are talking to us. And if you've ever listened to Colin Campbell, you believe in the 100% sincerity of his message. There's absolutely nothing about that kindly old man that looks like it's trying to be manipulative for anything. Okay, so that's about the level that it takes for a human being to believe in the shaman. It takes a lot to believe in that shaman. It takes a whole bunch of them singing the same tune. And it takes some observation of, wow, people really are really fat and out of shape, and they really are sitting down at Burger King and slogging that stuff down. And when I eat that stuff, I feel kind of sick. So maybe there's something to this. So your question about, how is this supposed to work? Well, it's working just the way it's supposed to work. In other words, there's nothing wrong with your motivational system. You get a hyperactivated dopamine hit from drinking wine. I'm not a bit surprised you're doing it 12 glasses a week. You are following your instincts. And you're like, well, I don't want to follow my instincts because I actually believe that that's the wrong path. Okay, then I'm going to tell you the only solution that I know to the problem. And that is that people will stop thinking about stimuli if they don't experience them. It's what I call going out of season. So your brain is a resource acquisition device. If it doesn't believe that the resource is available, it will quit orienting itself towards the resource. This was first demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov. If you feed the dog and ring the bell, pretty soon the dog figures out that ringing the bell means it's going to have food. But if you then, after you do that, and the dog fully believes in the bell means food, if you keep ringing the bell and don't feed the dog for 20 or 30 trials, pretty soon the dog does not come running when you ring the bell. They now find out that there isn't any food there. So once it finds out that that resource is no longer available, it's not excited about it. So by the time you don't drink for a couple of months, you're going to find that you will almost not be thinking about it. Your brain will have followed a seasonal algorithm that basically says, oh, it must be out of season. Okay. That's the only way I know to get out of an addictive process, is you have to take it out of season. And as soon as you put it back in season, the thing lights up and says, oh my God, it's back in season. And then you're thinking about it all the time. Okay. Just as you should. So don't think about this thing as a nemesis. Think about it as a life-saving algorithm that's in every animal. That our ancestors, as soon as they picked some fresh peaches in the spring, believe me, they're thinking about those peaches every day. They should. But when they pick the last peach, and then a month goes by and there's no more peaches, they quit thinking about the peaches. So the way for you to quit thinking about and being haunted and drawn in to the magnetic pull of that alcohol is going to be to go cold turkey and don't touch it. Don't touch it over and over and over and over and over again. We're going to find that when Pavlov hit the bell 3 or 4 times after and did not feed the dogs, those dogs were still super excited. Why? Because he had done it 30 times in a row, they had been fed. So you're going to have a period of time when you're going to believe that this is a time of day and this is a place and this is the right time and I feel like it, I'm thinking about that alcohol and therefore I should go get it. Yeah, okay. But if you don't and you consistently choose to not do that, you're going to find that in 30 days, your thinking about that is much reduced. And you're going to find in 60 days, it's almost there, not at all. And you'll even wonder where it went. And I can tell you, you can find it like that. All you have to do is have 1 glass of wine. And then the system says, hey, the peaches are back in season. And then you're going to be thinking about it and going for it. So that's the nature of relapse. We can understand addictive processes through an evolutionary view of Pavlovian process. If Pavlov was not thinking as a deep evolutionary theorist, he was sort of thinking a little bit that way, and so do learning theorists, but they don't quite integrate learning theory too well with understanding the problems of the animal as it's related to caloric scarcity. If you do, you'll find that learning theory experiments in the last 100 years all make sense. They make pretty good sense anyway, just in terms of, quote, reinforcement and punishment. but they really make sense when it comes to resource acquisition problems, and it maps beautifully onto addiction. It's like that is, you're looking at the addictive process. Addictive process is not something that went wrong with this machine and got damaged in development by trauma. That's not what happened. What happened is the system ran into a supernormal stimuli and it got trapped into a Pavlovian paradigm. That's what it is. Right.
But how, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I understand taking it out of season if you physically can't get it, but how do you stop thinking about it? So I'll give you an example from my life. So I moved up here from Southern California in the spring of 2022. And then the September of that year, we flew back, the only time I've been back, for my dog to have some surgery. So we had dinner at this raw vegan restaurant. I had these really amazing, hyper palatable nachos. They had some salt, but they were sugar-free and oil-free, and they were like incredible. And I've never been able to stop thinking about him. And so I was back in LA this January for a funeral. So of course I went there and got him again, but they like weren't as good. So I'm still thinking about the first time. And then last week we went to a meetup and we're at this vegan restaurant and they had these nachos that look similar. And it's like, you know, I mean, how do you take, is there like a way to have like a lobotomy so you don't like
And there shouldn't be. In other words, there should not be any way to get that out of your head, because if it was highly reinforcing, you should never forget it. But you're going to find that you weren't going to fly 400 miles and go to a bunch of trouble. You know what I'm saying? So it's always in the context of a global cost benefit, which is why, you know, we keep synthesizing the solution to these problems back to environmental control. So this is what this is. And you are correct, though, when you if you've had a really exciting supernormal stimuli, the system shouldn't forget it. It should file it away. You know what I'm saying? And every now and then it should fly back there just to check. Oops, I actually have to go. All right. Anyway, that's the story of addiction process, and our best solution for that. Unfortunately, there's no Jedi mind trick. We wish there were, but actually, if there were, it would be a disaster in evolution. So you better remember where the fancy stimuli is, and you better be thinking about it if you've had it recently, because it's probably still in season. And so if you take it out of season, that's your path to making it go quiet.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lisle.
Fantastic. Great to see you, AJ. It's April 1st. I didn't have an April Fool's joke, but it's a beautiful spring.
Right. And we'll see you on the 21st for the Dugathon. Link is registered below. And please come back at 2 p.m. for another great show. Take care.